Good everyone. I hope you guys having an amazing day. So what I'll do today, I'll talk about ethical use of artificial intelligence, and obviously, as you know, right? I mean, we are in 2023, so I mean, if you're watching, say, this episode perhaps in 2024 or 2025, it's still going to be relevant. The use of ethics in when it comes to artificial intelligence, because um, for instance, ChatGPT kind of revolutionized the way we look at AI. Now everyone kind of uh, get fascinated uh, by the actual possibility of artificial intelligence. It's not that AI was not around. It's just that the level of usage, the level of um, acceptance rate has gone quite high in 2023, and thanks to ChatGPT and other AI products out there. So now that being said, right, it's very important that when we develop an artificial intelligence technology, we need to consider ethics. Ethics forms a very important role because anything what we do on this planet Earth, we need to factor ethics into consideration. Let me give you, very simple classic example why ethics is important. In machine learning, I'm gonna teach you guys from Trailhead. I'm gonna briefly, talk about different topics and just give you an overview about why it is important, right? Let's say, you're building a machine learning model, and the machine learning model wants to target, let's say, a group of people um, who struggle with, uh, let's say, testicle cancers, right? So your model is to target usually people, let's say, um, a certain age group, and people who are, let's say, cyclists or people who do extreme sports. So let's say if the model is meant to target those people, um, you could see that, right, from one aspect that we are actually targeting male and also certain age group. Uh, but, but, right, there is a bias in this equation. We are targeting only male, right? That's a bias. The first thing. What if you are a transgender, right? You can probably say it, right, and they could also get this the same problem, right? They could be an athlete who might have the same issue. So we have to target our model in such a way that the bias don't kick in. Bias is like, okay, now you must be wondering. Let's talk about what do you mean by bias, right? What exactly is the word bias mean? So bias is like a computer error in simple terms, right? Say for instance, you are expecting certain outcome, but your computer started giving not so desirable outcomes. Instead, it started generating stuff which is close to what you desire, but not really. Instead, it added some extra randomness and fuzziness in your outcome, right? For instance, like I said, again, an example about uh, um, the testicle cancer, the more the model to so we are actually creating a model to identify the group of users who might be prone to testicle cancers, right? So obviously the model said, okay, male, because we are training the model with the data, the male data. um, let's say you're getting a data from, let's say, a renowned uh, universities, right, who often do this kind of research. And let's say the university does not talk about transgenders whatsoever. They only focus on just the male. Now, I know that you might be thinking why I'm bringing the transgender topic. I'm just talking from a biased perspective, right? I just don't have any opinion, positive, negative, because don't hammer me with this conversation. I'm not just interested in this, because if you must be thinking, oh, are you going to talk about that? Are you going to talk? I'm talking from a tech standpoint, um, from a data modeling standpoint. So I just wanted to make it very clear, right? So let's say a university, right, or a research institute who model the data, and they've been modeling the data based on, the data set which only talks about male, right? So what that happens is, uh, so your model will only target or take into consideration the people who are male, right? Like I said, it excludes the transgender. um, and they may or may not get it, right? But given the fact that you're moral excluded, so I introduced a bias, right? Now, you must be thinking that there are a lot of reasons for bias. It's first of all, it's a cultural thing, right? The cultural thing adds a lot of bias. Religious thing adds a lot of bias, um, because a lot of social bias comes in equation, right? And so that social norm, culture norm, religious norm, whatever extra norms, whatever you wanted to add, you know, has been governing humans' behavior for centuries, right? And now imagine that behavior get trained into your training set, and that training set and your machine will obviously learn the behavior from the training set you've been trying to teach, right? And based on that, the outcome will be different. So that's why it's very important that when you consider training artificial intelligence, ethics plays important, and that's ethics. Uh, you need to uh, build that ethical culture in your organization, right? First of all, build diverse team, right? Include people from different areas, different race, different gender, different sexual orientation, you know. So it's essential that we bring all these people together. Of course, it's based on the skill set, right? You can't bring someone just based on gender or sexual orientation. The person should know uh, the skill set, right? So if the person knows the skill set, then it's important to include them into the equation when you're trying to build uh, a model like this, right? Because it's very important to get the conscious opinion. And also, you need to have. So that's why like for instance, I run my climate change foundation, right? So for me, it's about we've mostly focused on educating people on climate change, and also our next target is to gene edit plant. So, so I have to always make sure, right, as a founder of my foundation, we should not bring in any bias into our culture, and we maintain high level of ethics and integrity, and that's very important for me because and involve and diversity is very important because I live in New Zealand, right? And it's very important for me that we talk about diversity, right? I'm not from the United States. I'm not from different parts of Europe. I don't honestly care because we are in ANZ. So this is something I personally believe that when we are when we are building a solution, we should include the right audience, right? That's all about I'm trying to say. So, and it's very important to understand your customer, right? Obviously, when you're building an artificial intelligence model, you need to know which customer you should target. So I'm going to talk about the bias, in a minute. There are good bias, bad bias. There are false negative, false positive. So all kind of stuff. I'm going to look at it in a second, but just wanted to understand that it's if you're a company who deal with artificial intelligence, it's very important to bring a core ethical culture into your organization, and that will in turn route it to the software, a product you're trying to build. Otherwise, there will be a high tendency or possibility that you might introduce a bias in the form of cognitive bias, cultural bias, religious bias, or society bias, whatever bias you wanted to tell. Okay, now, is there anything called a good bias, right? You might ask. Okay, now let's take an example of testicle cancer example. Let's say you included male and transgender, but obviously we have excluded female. Female don't get testicle cancer, right? You and I very well know that. So we have excluded that group. And is that a good bias? It's a kind of good bias, right? Because what's the point of targeting a female when it comes to testicle cancer, right? It makes no sense. So you'll be targeting instead like a cervical cancer. So that group gets included when you're talking about the cervical cancer, right? Or the breast cancer, right? So in that scenario, yes, it makes total sense. And imagine you're talking about the cervical cancer and excluded, let's say, um, let's talk about cervical cancer because the cervical cancer is something I've been involved in Ministry of Health in New Zealand. I was the lead architect for the project along with one of my good mates. So we built solution on Salesforce system. So now I was not involved in the campaigning aspect of it, who we're going to target, but I'm just giving you a very simple context. Imagine, right? This is a hypothetical scenario. It's got nothing to do with Health New Zealand, But just giving you a hypothetical scenario, right? Imagine if you're building a cervical, uh, cancer-based system, right? And your AI, you're building an artificial intelligence so that you send out a campaign for the people to register for cervical test. Okay. Now, imagine there are four kinds of ethnicity in your. I'm not going to name any of the ethnicity because I know the people are going to start saying, "Hey, how dare you to talk about my race, this and that." Humans beings sometimes get into nitty gritty aspect of things, which is relevant either way. But anyways, sorry, digress. So let's say we got five, you know, four ethnicity, right? And out of which one ethnicity, all female, we're talking about, you only target three ethnicity, right? And you assume that they person, since we don't have any concrete data about them getting cervical cancer, let's exclude them from the campaign. Now, what does that tell you? Is that a good bias or is that a bad bias? According to me, that is a bad bias because just because we don't have a data that they, of that specific ethnic race of not getting cervical cancer, and we're targeting female population, right? It doesn't mean that they may or may not get it, right? So excluding them from the equation is gonna add a significant bad bias to the system, and that bad bias is very bad when it comes to from an ethical standpoint. I hope you're getting what I'm trying to say, right? Because this topic really pisses people off, right? And people don't really want to talk about it, and which is really frustrating in my opinion because we are 2023, and in certain culture, right? I get it, it's a culture thing, and maybe you must be thinking that, this guy is making an assumption, but what I've heard, what I've read, based on that, I'm drawing a conclusion. It's just not my personal opinion, based on my own random thinking. I'm just saying based on the information I read for a different place. Certain culture don't encourage certain group of people to talk about certain things. So when those group of people, when those culture gets involved in building an artificial intelligence product, there is a high likely chance a bias will get introduced, right? So yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, and that's why it's very important to have a right ethics and right framework in place, so that we don't exclude the people who are supposed to be included, as well as we don't include those people who are supposed to be excluded. I hope that clear. Okay, now let me go back to bias in artificial intelligence. Right, this is very important. Now, I briefly touched about different kinds of bias, ethical bias. Now, ethical and legal, right? There are like for instance, I give an example of excluding transgender, right, from testicle cancer campaign based on the AI model. Is that illegal? Not really. Depending upon the jurisdiction you are, let's say in your jurisdiction it's not illegal, right, for whatever bizarre reason. But is it ethical? Right? I don't think it's ethical that you exclude it because just because you're not exposed to the concept, you just completely ignored it, right? These people are supposed to be included, but based on that bias, which whatever reason that got introduced, AI completely excluded this group of people from this testicle cancer campaigning to be received, so that they can come and start having tests, right? So that's very important. When you're building a solution, it's very important that you consider the bias that kicks in based on different forms. Sorry, based on different input. Maybe um, the training data is pretty limited, and if you keep on training your AI model based on the similar training data, it's most likely that you will introduce the bias. So that's why just because it is legal to do that, it's not necessarily makes it ethical every single time. And we are talking about building a solution for a global population, right? Think about it, right? Let me give you a very simple example. Like, I've been in software development for most of my life, right? And I used to have a cognitive bias, right? I used to think that functional people can't code, and I don't like them getting anywhere near the code. So when they said, "Oh, I think I can code," I straight away said, "I don't think these people can code," because they are not exposed to that computer science world. They just come in because this tech is cool. So I was even hesitant to give these people an opportunity to get into the tech space. So I used to say, nah, business analysts should nowhere come near the tech space, because I was under the impression that, oh yeah, these people will ruin our ecosystem, add more tech debt, and cause more frustration for customers. So these people should never ever be allowed to touch the code. That was my cognitive bias when I was in a, different. I'm not talking from a Salesforce perspective. When I was a bit younger, but I was naive, a bit, I was considered one of, a very good developer back in the days. Even now, I can code. So I used to, write very complex. My intention was to keep everything simple and write the complex logic in such a way that, so whoever reads the code, they read it like a story. And I used to think that a functional person will not be able to do that. So that's a bias, a very big bias, a very big assumption. Was I right? Not really. I was wrong there, right? Because I shouldn't have assumed the person mental capability. That person may be functional, might be extremely talented. I have worked, especially in Salesforce, right? People who are functional people, but they can write very good code. So, I worked with people who are extremely good when it comes to writing code. At the same time, I have seen people who are not so good, right? So there are people who can do stuff. There are people who can't do stuff, right? So introducing that bias based on assumption is a very bad practice. Was it illegal? It was not illegal, right? Because you have your own, because I had a data. Because I mean, when I made those assumptions, there was no data back in the days to justify that a functional guys can code. There were very few limited data, so based on that, I could justify to the stakeholder, hey, I don't find any information. I don't trust these people can do the tech delivery based on their functional experience. And the stakeholders will usually say, yeah, that's right, because we don't have any data, so we don't have to worry about it. So we normally don't end up in hiring those people. So that was a cognitive bias, right? Because it's not only from my side, right? There are many companies who have done similar stuff. You would be surprised, even the very high tech firms, right? Who you call them as the golden standard in terms of technology, even they have done such similar stuff, right? Because of the bias they have in that uh, space and time. But things are improving thanks to artificial intelligence. We're getting more broader and diverse aspect of the same thing. So people are more, uh, how do I say? People are more accustomed um, to accept new ideas. So, and that is what we need. So that if you are building a future based on artificial intelligence, we need people with open mind, their attitude, right? Because these are the people who will be contributing to the development of AI. And if people who are very close minded, very primitive thinking, very outdated mindset should not be allowed anywhere close to artificial intelligence, because they will ruin the ecosystem. Okay, now let me give you a very classic example of the measurement of the data set bias, right? Data set bias, as I said, the training set bias is very real. Okay, so I'll give you an example from a trailer. Let's say you trained your dog data set, and let's say you have a data set and you labeled it as dogs, right? And all of the dogs in that of, let's say, a certain color, let's make it fun. Let's say you have a dog, funny dog, a red color dog, right? Red color dog, fantastic, right? So there's funny, funky dogs, what we, funny dogs, you can say. Let's say you have a dog, uh, which is a red color dog, uh, and genetically engineered dog, right? The dogs which are created in the lab. Let's say all of them red colors. And now you're training your data set labeled dogs, and all of the dog image, which the computer vision will come into equation, which I don't want to get into detail, but just for the sake of argument, just say we're using computer vision here. All the image, right, of the dog you train are the dogs who are red in color. Now imagine you introduce a dog who are, let's say, a light brown color dog, right? And imagine that your data set, of all the data set you've trained of the light brown were cats or white cats. Now, what will happen if you pass the image of the the brown dog to the your uh, to your model, it will say, it's not a dog because I've never seen a dog who's brown in color. I've always seen a red dog. So it'll say it's something else, right? So that's the bias in the data set, right? So it happens. I've seen it happens, right? I've done a lot of work in the neural net and machine learning space, right? So I know this data set bias is very, very real. Maybe you're new to artificial intelligence. You must be thinking, how's that possible? It is very, very, very possible, right? So that is how the data set bias came. Then we have something called type 1 error or type 2 error, which is according to which normally called false positive or false negative. Like for instance, banks, right? Bank always rely on false negative. So if you wanted to take a loan, right, and let's say you're an applicant, right, and according to the computer system, according to the AI model, if the AI model says, hey, you have a very high capability of paying the loan, but you didn't end up in paying the loan, that comes as a false positive. But on the other hand, if the AI system thinks that you don't have any capability to repay the loan, but in real life you have very high capability to pay back the loan, that is considered as the type false negative or type 2 loan. And bank always rely on false negative. They always wants the model system with the belief that this person will not be able to repay the loan. That's the attitude they use. I mean, it's a fail-safe attitude. I don't blame them because obviously, the bank is here to lend you money and get a profit out of it, right? If you're not going to pay back the money you borrowed, then there is a high chance that bank will go bust over the course of time. So that's the reason why they have this fail-safe. So I don't really blame banks for it. If I run a bank, then I will probably use the same approach. I mean, I wish I could, but I don't. Right. Another bias, right? I'll tell you, I'm a Jewish, right? And one of the most freaking bias, which I have always hated it. The moment I said to people I'm Jewish, they said, "Are you a banker?" I'm not a banker. I'm a software architect. I don't do banking stuff, right? I suck in banking. Yeah, I do understand few and stuff, but and I have a lot of Jewish mates. None of them are bankers, right? This is sometimes, people used to think, Jewish people always get into the banks. We run banks, we run, different stuff. Yes, there are people, some of them who were involved in it, and they're very successful, right? Like from every other diversity or every other group. But that doesn't mean that, or other stereotype I've seen in general is that, oh yeah, you must be very good with money, right? Yeah, I know how to manage my money. I've done some course on money management. Yes, I've done that. My father has father has motivated me to do that. But when I was young, so I do know how to manage my money well. But that's got nothing to do with me being Jewish, right? So if imagine somebody building this AI model, right, based on that bias. So okay, this guy is Mr. Cohen. You're a Jewish guy. Okay, must be good with money. Must be a banker. That's a pretty stupid and biased system, right? So I'm not saying that you won't get Cohens who are not bankers, right? There might be a Cohens who are banker, but I'm not. So yeah. So that is a bias. So there are different kinds of bias. So the reason why I wanted to address it, right? I've seen bias getting kicked into the software we're building, and then another bias, right? Let's say you're targeting a doll, right? The dolls for kids, and now most of the dolls for the guys I've seen, even at McDonald's, right? The biggest freaking biased. McDonald's have something called Happy Meal, yeah. And now McDonald's gives Happy Meal. You want to eat at McDonald's, right? I'm talking from a New Zealand perspective. I'm pretty sure it's the same in the United States or in UK, wherever, right? I've eaten in Europe too, so McDonald's Happy Meal, right? Especially, what I've seen. If you buy McDonald's Happy Meals for girls, right? They often target, uh, dolls with, purple color hair or pink hair. With the boys, is always black hair. And that too, like usually when let's say they're giving a unicorn, stupid example, but I'm just saying. And if the unicorn will have a black hair when it comes to a boy, why? It's not always necessary that a boy only likes black. They might like purple. Who knows, right? So that's a bias-based of system we have, right? Because and unfortunately, right, a lot of them is a cultural stuff, right? And this is what really annoys me, right? Because we use culture as an excuse to justify a lot of things, which has been going on for centuries. And we reached the stage when we are in 2023, we're talking about concept like transhumanism, going to Mars to colonize it, and we're still talking about things which is of like fifth century and sixth century stuff. And I'm surprised that people even justify that. Oh, hey, this. I mean, each their own. But for me, the problem is when you're building an AI solution, I honestly don't like the cultural bias to kick in. So, and then we have automation bias and the society bias I talked about, and survey bias. If you're sending out a survey and service, assume that if you're male, you would do this. If you're a female, you would do this. That's which is not really great, but so that's why it's very important to have a diverse training data set so that we can cover edge case scenarios, different scenarios. Like I gave you a scenario that a boy's like purple. I don't like pink color, but that doesn't mean that another guy, or sorry, another boy kid don't like pink, right? So it's very important that we train our model in such a way that we are training our model with the right data set. So that's why it's very important to consider the bias into consideration. I'm not saying that we can make it 100% bias free. There will be a scenario where the bias will kick in, but it's an opportunity to learn from it and improve your model. That's how I would frame it, right? So the McDonald example, I'm not saying that that the unicorn with the purple hair or pink hair will fit very well with every voice. That there will be boys out there who say, "Hey, I don't want this. It doesn't. I don't like pink color, right? So I want the unicorn with the black color." Just an example. I know it's a stupid example, but just for the sake of argument. Now that doesn't mean that there will be a boy who doesn't like it, right? So you can't exclude that. Just within this broad, flat assumption that okay, he's a boy, he doesn't will not like it whatsoever. What's your assumption? Because I assume so, right? Because this is a society, Yeah. So that's the bias I was talking about. Right. So that's from a bias perspective, and it's very important to talk about it because I've been, like I said, I've been involved in AI for a long time. My climate change does artificial intelligence. We're building climate change model. Uh, if you ask me, the climate change model use AI? Yes, we do use AI. We use extensively AI, and I've been working on it. I've been doing my own. We've been building our own LLM language models to train based on the climate data set. And yeah, there are a lot of exciting things happening because I don't only do Salesforce. Salesforce is just one part of my life, very tiny part, and I do transhumanism. That's one of the thing. Um, Actually, around transhumanism, I'm mostly involved at this stage in coming up with a proof of concept because I wanted to, because the transhumanism and gene editing kind of goes together for me, and I'm not targeting any humans at this stage. For me, it's about the plants because my carbon sequestration process is what I'm doing. So I'm trying to think about from a nanotech perspective how we can, uh, create an artificial ribosomes. I just don't want to get into detail, but just so that we can absorb more carbon dioxide. So if you're interested, right, I started writing a blog, the transhumanism. I know, sorry, I digress. So I make sure I write one blog in a week. That's all the capacity I got at this stage. So I spoke about future of human longevity with transhumanism, spoke about the role of IBM Watson when it comes to oncology, and then talk about gene editing and molecular and nanomedicines, all these kind of things. It's a very exciting field, And unfortunately, not many people talk about this because it's very new. But I'm optimistic by 20, maybe 35, we will be having a very, very open conversation about. And I also reached out the New Zealand government to have, hey, we need to have a ministry on transhumanism, because if you wanted to take our people to the next stage of evolution, we should be talking about it, right? I know there will be a backlash from a cultural and religious people. I understand that. We need to work with them. But that does not mean that we should allow, a different set of thinking uh, to put an obstacle in our development, right? That's why I'm a firm believer that with the right communication, with the right technology, we can make our human life more comfortable, extend our lifespan. Maybe we have an opportunity to colonize different planets in a solar system, or maybe we go beyond solar system. Let's talk from a universal scale, right? So it's an opportunity, right? And right now, our human body cannot withstand. We cannot even cross with our, the kind of technology what we have. It's very difficult to cross the certain orbit because of the high radiation, and our human body will not survive, no matter how fancy suit you can put, right? Otherwise, we would have crossed our solar system by now. We cannot send a manned mission to Mars. It's not possible at this stage. No matter, I know Elon Musk is very optimistic. I like him very much, but at the same time, he gets too optimistic, right? Which can be interesting. And for the things to happen, we need to talk about transhumanism. And transhumanism and artificial intelligence goes very, very well together. So if you're interested, read about it. It's the transhumanist odyssey.blogspot.com. I just started this last week. So, but that being said, I also have the climate change diary. So I have a lot of articles there. Yesterday I wrote an article on lithium-ion batteries. I also talked about carbon tax white paper, and I mean I got like 20, 25 articles there. I started this year, but I've been adding more and more stuff to it. If you're interested, check it out. Right, I'll put the link in the description below. It's up to you. If you want to read it, you're most welcome to do so. So yeah, sorry I digressed, but I thought just for you guys to understand how the artificial intelligence will fit in at a global scale. It will fit in at the climate change aspect, it will fit in as the transhumanism aspect. From a Salesforce perspective, we spoke about Einstein, and we'll look into that detail. So, but this is not an Einstein course, this is an overview. So remember what I taught today. It's very important to consider bias, right? Culture bias, social bias, religious bias, and all other kinds of bias. So when you're building an AI system, you need to have an open mind, right? You need to bring a say AI team, or you need to have a governance space where you consider diversity. It's very important, right? I know that some people not interested to talk about diversity. That's fine, but those people should not be part of AI development, in my opinion. They can do something else, right? I get it. People are entitled for their opinion. They are entitled for their opinion. I'm entitled for my opinion. So, I, as a founder, I will not include those people in anywhere close to AI if they don't like to talk about diversity, because we are not building a solution just for them. We are building a solution for a global audience, right? Unless they want to be excluded, right? Because of climate change, it's going to impact everyone. It's not that it's going to impact a certain group of people to say, hey, climate, oh yeah, we're going to exclude this race, we're going to exclude it. It's a global scale. It's a global phenomena, right? And as long as a human being start to realize that, right, we can't get to where we wanted to go, right? That's always been my main biggest challenge, dealing with different groups of human beings or biological entities, or whichever term you wanted to coin. So yeah, that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing Sunday. Adios.